Hello darlings, how the devil are you? MythForce just landed on my desk yesterday. I didn't even know it was in existence, and then Epic popped up a notification. I saw the trailer, instantly fell in love with it, downloaded it and gave it a play, and I've got a whole host of thoughts that I want to say about it. This is part one of the video. This is going to be an outline of what the game is and the abilities and, you know, all those good things and how it plays. The other video just outlines would I recommend picking it up currently, because it is in early access and I do have some thoughts surrounding it. But anyway, diving straight in, MythForce is a nostalgia kick to the nuts. It does it beautifully. It is one of those games that is being inspired and basically tries to create all the magic of those classic 80s cartoons. So if you imagine He-Man and Thunder Cats had a baby with Quake, then you end up with this wonderful roguelike first-person shooter, and it dives in and recreates all those wonderful tropey goodnesses with big bad guys in the background, you know, with their witty anecdotes all the way through. There's all sorts of wonderful voice acting and great one-liners. And if you weren't born in that age or you've not seen that genre before, I've no doubt you probably would enjoy this. But if you were, then you're going to have a lot more enjoyment from it, because it just really does pluck on all the heartstrings, or at least it did for me personally. So how the game works: you have 4 classes. There is a mage, there's a paladin, there's a bow guy, and there's also a roguelike character. Each of the characters comes with 3 active abilities. They're usually 1 escape defensive ability, 1 damaging ability, and then there's like an ulti ability that is used to get rid of a multitude of enemies. They all come with a certain passive as well, which usually relates to a certain weapon type. For example, the hunter is all about getting crits and then restoring stamina and mana, whereas the paladin warrior style character is all about blocking with a shield. She can do better blocks with a shield. So while it doesn't necessarily say that you have to play with this weapon all the time, it does lean you into a certain archetype. So this is a roguelike game. There are roguelike elements, so there are upgrades that you can do with each run. They're called infusions and ability upgrades. Infusions is a big passive tree. You basically select flat damage stats. You can choose between 3 for each point that you put in. And while they're nothing too exciting to write home about, they do make each repeat of the run a little bit easier. There's also ability upgrades. You can put ability points into your abilities to give them an effect that does something else. Each one of them can be upgraded 3 times. For example, the Hunter Escape can be upgraded so that when you run through enemies, it puts a chill effect on them. Lastly, there is also artifacts. You can select one of these artifacts to give you a buff for that certain run. For example, there's one called Hearty Meal, which will give you an additional 100 HP at the start. Or there's another one called Invigorating Tonic, which will alternatively give you more stamina at the start of the run. Each of the infusion trees are unique to each of the characters as well. Each of the characters have their own levels. The only thing that is consistent across all of them is the artifact that you choose when you start the round. So when you start off, it puts you into first person mode, and you've got all those wonderful cell shaded colouring effects that you associate with those old school cartoons. And they really have done their homework on this. The colour palettes are wonderful, the modelling is brilliant, and just the cell shading really does that justice to kind of like the effect that they're trying to create. So the way that the maps work is you'll go into like an arena, and then you'll start the level. Mobs will come in, you have to kill them. They range from skeletons, mushroom people, there's lizard people. They have different levels and difficulties. Some of them are more elite than others. There's also witches. But each of the rooms are random. There are some elements for each level that are the same, and there are some scripted events that happen. But for the most part, each one that you run into is slightly different than the other. In terms of loot, there are these big grey tombs that you open. They contain a whole host of different items that you can use on your character. And in terms of the weapons that you get to use, so you always start off with a weapon that relates to your character. So for example, on the archer, you get a bow to start with, but it doesn't mean that you are fixed to using the bow the whole time. There's also shields, swords, maces. There's spell books that you can use that come in the form of ice and fire, and additionally there's also daggers. Each of the weapons have its own rarity. It goes from the vanilla white all the way up to epic, and they have different status effects that apply to them. I haven't found any really interesting cool weapons yet. Most of them are like, you know, gives additional damage if the enemy's a certain HP, or they might put a fire effect, or they might do plus damage to another enemy type, for example. There are 4 slots that you can equip 4 different weapons on. The shield, which is an offhand thing, does take up a weapon slot. However, And then you have 1 slot for a healing potion, and then there's 4 slots for various passive armor upgrade items. And again, they're generally just flat stat stuff, so it's like reduces the amount of stamina you use when you have a dodge, or it might give you more stamina, or increase something like the damage that ice spells do. Additional roguelike elements come from when you level up as well. You're getting the chance to do 2 upgrades. One of them is a flat stat upgrade or a heal, and then the other one is more specific to the build that you are using. So it might give you more damage with bows, or it might mean that when you fire a bow, the arrow will pierce the enemy behind it. Or there's one that's called glass cannon, which is universal, which means that you have 50% less HP, but you do 75% more damage. The upgrades also have different levels, so if you, for example, select 10% plus bow damage, when you get it a second time, it will be the level 2 version, which will give you 20% bow damage. There are also random artifacts spread out the map. You can find them in the corners usually. Sometimes they will give you full health, sometimes they'll allow you to gamble with your gold to get an additional item. There's also a shopkeeper you can use to spend your gold on and then get again additional items, or you can swap out all the items. All very generic roguelike stuff, and this is pretty much the process all the way through. There are environmental things that will kill you. They're like these spiky tomato things that when you shoot they explode. You generally find yourself using them quite a bit to hit enemies on the side. And then there are like these skull flame things that if you get in front of will just burn you to death. There are a variety of round-like modes. So the first one is when you go into an arena, you just got to kill all the enemies till the gate opens. Sometimes you go in and then the big bad guy will give you some tropey quote, and then you have to survive for 2 minutes. And the last one that I've ran into is that you'll find this like witch-like character, and she does some sort of buff on the enemies, I think, that makes them do more damage. And you basically have to kill all the enemies and then kill her, and then the gate opens. And that is pretty much it in a nutshell. You'll keep doing these arenas till you get to the big boss, and then you kill it and then move on to the next one. If you die, however, you do get to spend your points on upgrading your character, and then you just repeat the process just like roguelikes tend to do. And that is pretty much it. If you want to see my thoughts on whether or not you want to buy it, I highly recommend you check out my other video. But until then, have a great week, everyone. Let me know what you thought of MythForce. If you have picked it up, what was your favourite 80s cartoon? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll be back with more reviews soon.